You're listening to the Empowering Process podcast with your host, Gail Kraft. Listen as she holds frank discussions around how your purpose, being present, and trusting your power impacts your life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, leader, or developing your vision, you'll find wisdom and insights you can utilize right now. Welcome your host, Gail Kraft.
Well, hello, everybody. Gail Craft here from the Empowering Process podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have with me an amazing woman called Kerri Lewis, and Kerri with an I, Kerri Lewis. And I'll tell you something afterwards about your name and what triggers for me every time I hear the name. It's so adorable. So Kerri and I are going to talk a little bit today, or maybe a lot, who knows where the conversation will go, about dependencies, about addiction, and about the beliefs that are wrapped around addictions, like the beliefs of shame and guilt, and what growing up with that is like, and what happens when you wake up from that story. So, Kerri, thank you for joining me today.
Gail, I am so excited to be here. First off, thank you for allowing me this space to talk with you and your audience. And secondly, for seeing me and being a witness to, my evolution, because as we were just saying off the recording, right? Everything about each moment is a part of our journey. And so I'm very, very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Oh, this will be really, really great. Um, Addiction. Let's talk a little bit about that and the stories and beliefs that are around that. One of the things that I've experienced through an addictive behavior myself. I was a smoker. Addiction is an addiction. Um, some people have, OCDs, whatever. And then you've got the obvious drug and alcohol abuse, but any kind of abuse to yourself, habitual abuse is an addiction. And there's shame around that, and there is judgment around that. And so often I was a closet smoker. You talk about shame. My
Yeah.
own husband thought I had quit smoking. My children never saw me smoke, right?
Wow.
Yes. Yes, right? It was really an interesting journey, and which is one of the reasons why it took me a long time to quit, because I didn't address the shame,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right? So, let's talk a little bit about your childhood experience and what that was like. So the floor is yours, Kerri.
Well, thank you. So it's interesting, I think to start off, for anybody out there who's wondering, I am an addiction recovery coach and have navigated several addictions in my lifetime. And absolutely, if I'm not conscious in the present moment, can fall back into that addictive patterns of behavior. So it's really important for me to be very present in any given moment. I grew up in a home where my parents just did not have the mental wellness needed to really nurture their children in a way that would be supportive and um, make us feel loved and valued and worthy. And as a result, I spent my childhood feeling like I had to perform to be seen. And when I performed and still wasn't seen, I acted out. And I also felt like my presence was truly wasted. I didn't have a sense of myself at all. And so as a result, I, as quickly as possible at the age of 14, left home. But I believe that we as energetic beings, we're all connected, right? And so you're constantly craving that connection. And as a result, I fell into really toxic behaviors as a means to really feel that connection. So I really leaned heavily into to sex, to being with people and doing whatever it is that they wanted, to prove to myself that I was loved and worthy of being with other people. And then because that really didn't fulfill my inner suffering, I leaned into drugs to continually numb out so that I didn't have to experience my pain.
So let's stop here for a moment, because what we're talking about is, without enlightened guidance, that means someone who gets what's going on, what can a child or a young adult do but figure out how to cope?
You're right.
Right,
Exactly.
right. And to us, coping is escaping, right? It's because I don't feel the pain anymore if I do this. I feel a different pain, but I don't feel that pain,
Hmm.
right? And so when we talk about addiction, we're talking about people who have grown up without a strong coping mechanism, right? And and that worked for them, although for a short periods of time it worked. So you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And everything in between, right?
Right.
And well, it's interesting because you're right. Children don't know how to cope. Um, and they experience tremendous suffering, which I think as we continue to look at the world from a very superficial place, you see a lot of suffering continuing to go on because people don't have at the core a sense of self. We don't have a sense of self, which really is established in your formative years when you're a child, right? If you're not nurtured and loved, then you don't believe that you're worthy of nurturing and loving. So that's really important, when I do work with myself and others, to make sure that they start to understand intrinsically that they are worthy and that they are lovable just as they are in any given moment without expectation of being anything but where they are at in that moment, you know? And that's really important for me.
Yes, so expectations, when I work with clients, we spend a lot of time on, you know, loving yourself, expectations, and judgments. Those three things, right? And expectations transcends, you know, spoken and unspoken expectations. If you've ever said, well, they should know me, there's an expectation right there,
You're
right?
right.
Right, right. And how many times have we said that in our life? Or what, you know, why do they do that all the time? Well, first of all, they don't all the time, right? But then again, there's an expectation probably not expressed, right? That someone is disappointing in, so you're making a judgment, right? And so it's a vicious circle. And
It
as
is.
soon as, right, as you learn to release expectations and understand what is it that I'm missing in me, that I'm expecting them or an outside source to fulfill. Because even if they do, you know, and it's interesting, I had this conversation with someone the other day. Having someone else fulfill your need is exhausting for them,
Yes, absolutely.
right? They cannot keep it up. They're going to fail.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. So, so you had sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You were coping, and one day, this doesn't happen in one day, guys, but the light bulb does go on. What happened where you realize that this isn't working and there's got to be another way?
Well, you know, that there's two specific situations that I became aware that there was a different way of being. One was when I was being raped for the second time by a partner who made it pretty clear that it was his intent to break my spirit. And I really believe that in that moment, there was that inner spirit in me that said, not on your life, buddy. Like, you don't really stand a chance. And, you know, that resulted in me getting sober and really working diligently for 5 years on my mental health and getting clarity around who I was and who I wanted to be in this world. But because that subconscious belief system was so ingrained, and those feelings of unworthiness and unlovableness was so deeply rooted, I very quickly fell back into addictive behavior and married somebody who was the spitting image of my father in many ways, beautiful soul, really kind, but struggled with deep mental health issues and addiction, right? So I started to spiral. And then when my older sister passed away due to drinking, I ended up in her apartment and she had drank herself to death. And as a result, there was evidence to how she passed away, and I had an out of body experience. And really, it was then that source kind of spoke to me and said, "You have everything you need. You've already healed. You know what it is you need to do. You just need to do it." And so as a result,
Talk a little bit back up on the out of body experience,
yeah.
because that is so profound. And many times we have those experiences and we don't acknowledge them,
Mm.
right? So
Y-
what was that like?
Yeah, peace. It's interesting because from an ego state of mind, you're in all of this chaos. It's you know, but just this overwhelming sense of everything being perfect, and peace and joy and clarity, like just and it's a clarity that I can't put into context. It's just like this visceral knowing within you that everything is unfolding beautifully and it's all going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. And so that's the experience I had. And as a result of that moment where I knew it was just perfection, like everything is perfect. That's the best way to describe it. I was able to rip apart my life in 6 months. It gave me that much confidence that no matter what I was going to face in the external world, in the experiences that I needed to move through to continue to heal and move through addiction, that it was going to be okay. As messy as it felt, it was all okay. It was perfect. It's incredibly profound.
Right? It is, and as you said, it's an experience and therefore something that is impossible to describe,
It is.
right? When we have those moments, and this is why sometimes people don't recognize it, because it is so, why do I feel this moment of peace while I'm sitting in the middle of chaos? That's insane.
Mhm.
And they poo-poo it, right?
Yes.
Right. And they walk away from the opportunity to realize that, we are all, first of all, we're all connected. We are all connected, right? And that everything is energy. And what we put so much value on is really a story that we make up,
Absolutely.
right? And so you woke up, um, you tore your life apart. What was that like? I mean, that is, I think, the scary thing. And then I'll add a little example here. Again, I was in a woman's circle this week, and we were talking about the feminine and, our leaning into and what it's like to realize that we were so masculine at some point in our life. And this is not male, female, this is an energy. And when we got to me, I will only share my story because that's the only thing that is anything else is someone else's story. So my story is that I was afraid that I would have to kill that part of me, right? And I didn't want to kill myself, right? I didn't want to, shut the door until I realized that I was never going to kill a part of who I am. I was just not allowing the other part of who I am to express herself.
Beautiful.
Right.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right. And so it's allowing yourself to express yourself. And that's part of the coping mechanism. So what are some of the things, some of the steps that you took that was, oh, wow, that's an aha, and wow, that's an aha, in your journey to stepping into who you are? So let's not say healing, but stepping into who you are.
Yeah. So it's interesting. You're really brought to your knees. If you're really willing, first off, when you know that you're safe, then you're able to examine core beliefs, behaviors, and identities that you've clung to without judgment. And I think that's really the most important piece to your journey is, again, having no expectation, not even of others, but of yourself, and remaining curious rather than judging whatever comes up. And so I was able to examine the house of cards, so to speak, that I built, from a place of curiosity. Oh, why did I marry a man who was just like the person I feared much of my life, right? And I was able to look at that. Um, and security. They both provided a sense of security. And then getting curious about, well, why is it that I believe that I needed to be in a partnership with somebody else to provide that security, right? Well, because as a child, I felt like I never had that security. So if I couldn't get it on my own as a child, then what would make me believe I could get it on my own as an adult, right?
Mhm.
So really just getting curious, but as you examine those beliefs, or specifically to me, as I examine them, it brought up such deep and profound sorrow, like just pain that had not allowed myself to experience, of course, because I was numbing out. Um, and just, it was just a full body, like real full mind, body, spirit experience of pain. And that, I would say, lasted for about 2 years on and off, really allowing myself to sit with whatever needed to come up, because in the big picture, right, because I had had that experience in my sister's apartment, I knew I was safe. So I knew that no matter what presented itself, as uncomfortable as it was, I, in the big picture, was going to be safe. But in those moments, it really was deep suffering, and it was arduous, because to examine every belief that you've ever held on to so deeply, whether it's how to show up as a mother, what is an effective leader, to what makes you lovable, you really have to go back to. And then when the answer ultimately ends up being, you don't have to do anything. There's
Right.
nothing you have to do, right? To
Right.
get to that place, right? Really free of expectation. It's just such a process. And again, it was really, it was so worth it, having gone through it. But I still to this day can recall just moments of agony, and really just um holding on, clinging to that experience in my sister's apartment, and saying, right now I don't feel it, but I had it, and I'm going to believe it, and I'm going to make it through. And that's what carried me, and that's why I do what I do now, because particularly when we're talking about people who are enmeshed in conditioned beliefs and behaviors, and let's call a spade, that's really what it is. It's not even anything that any particular person made a conscious choice. They didn't say, hey, I'm going to operate with this set of beliefs. No, this is something that we have been conditioned with since, in utero and beyond, right?
It's
Because
unconscious
ex-
conditioning.
Absolutely. And so, so it's through no fault of anybody's, but when you start to really get curious about that, the process can be incredibly scary. And so my hope in the work that I do is that I make the journey a little bit more bearable. I can't take away another person's suffering, but what I can do is I can love them through it and hopefully guide them towards the finish line, because I think a lot of people start to do the work, but that suffering becomes immense and they stop because it feels um you feel like you're going to get swallowed whole by it,
Well,
right?
it feels like you can't stop the suffering. I've had potential clients that I've had my introductory session with, and they have said, I can't face the pain. I just can't do this right now. And they're not ready, and that's fine. When you're ready, I'm here for you, right? And I totally get it. I tell the story of my last big breakthrough, and I've had many little ones, profound ones, but little since. Um, I thought I was dying. I
Mhm.
literally, my heart was breaking open and I thought I was having a heart attack. And I knew I had to make a choice of, calling 911, and have them put me on a gurney and start giving me heart drugs, or face what is it that I have done in my life that I have gotten to this point. What am I looking for with that's outside that I'm supposed to be looking inside,
Mhm.
right? Right. And I will tell you that experience has allowed me to open my heart to the work that I do. Right. Right. Brene Brown says this beautiful thing. Open heart, strong back.
I love
Right.
Brene Brown.
Yes. And the work that we do, we have to have an open heart, not be empathic, or maybe be empathic, but don't hold on to other people's pain. Right. But a strong back, because we have to also be truthful about, you need to look in the mirror, look at yourself in the mirror. You need to do this. I can't look for you. I'll hold your hand, I'll hear your story unravel, right? You don't go through this alone, but you have to be the one to look in the mirror. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, particularly what I bump up against a lot is my clients or some potential clients, they want a program and they want this program that is going to be A to Z, soup to nuts. This is going to be the process. And at the end, you're free. And I tell them all the time, there's no way that you're ever going to find a program that is going to help free you from your own suffering. It's all within you, and really, because we are all energetically connected, just as you said, is, you know, my potential clients come to me because what lies within me already lies within them. It's just covered up by all of the stories.
Right.
And so it's there for the taking. You can ask yourself anything, really, truly, at the end of the day, nobody needs a coach. If you're willing to do the work, you can do it on your own. It's just that if you have somebody who's gone through the process and is continuing to go through the
Right.
process, we talked about this before, it's a continuous journey. Then it makes those days, those moments where it just becomes unbearable, easier to go through because you have somebody who's already made it to past that point in their journey, right? So,
Right. And they can
yeah,
hear you and they see you. And I'll often say, you know, thank you for allowing me to bear witness to your growth.
yes,
Right. That's what we do. And yes, we have tools to help you through them. We will have tools to help bring up what you're hiding. We have tools to help you understand what's going on, but intellectually understanding, and I've had many clients who get there and can't get past that, will
Yes.
not bring you to an elevated state of living. You have to do the work. You have to be vulnerable, and vulnerable doesn't mean you go out there and let the world see what you're doing. Vulnerable to yourself. It means,
Yep.
again, you look in the mirror and you look in your eyes and you see who you really are.
Well, you said something about logically, and I that brings to mind Dr. David R. Hawkins' work, right? Because
I
I'm a
love
huge
him.
fan. I've read most of his work. I continue to reference it when I'm working with people who are stuck in shame and guilt because
Right.
it's a scientifically based tool that can help people understand why they need to release those emotions. But he talks about, the 10,000 years where people are they intellectualize everything. And as a result, they are stuck from moving into that next level of consciousness because
Right.
we do try to think it through, and it's not a thinking experience. It can't be. It has to be a felt, a known, a deeply seated connection that you will never be able to put into context. And so that's why what I had mentioned to you prior to us recording is that I love that you're doing the work, right? And why that's important to me is at the end of the day, there are no words that are gonna allow me to convey to my client that the journey they're on is working, but my energy is going to. It has nothing to do with um, what I say, and even very little to do with what I do, because I can do a lot of things that have no real meaning to it. But if my energy comes from a place of true unconditional love and that true compassion, that's what I think is needed to help people move through the experience and release shame and guilt. Because if I can witness you and not have an energetic reaction, right? Because this is what happens is, we ask people, oh, you should open up to us. And then they share a story about, well, when I was young, I used to beat my brother and I stole from my mother, right? And that person's energy immediately zips up, and you're being judged, even if the person says, oh, I'm not judging you, right? That creates more shame. But if you can be a witness and truly experience somebody's story, and just like you said, it's just a story, it's not real, then they're able to be like, well, maybe I don't need to condemn myself anymore. Maybe I don't need to continue to crucify myself for the choices and the experiences that I had when I wasn't even the person I am in this moment in the first place, right? Because we're not.
I'll tell you a person. This is a story I've not shared with anybody. I had a sister who has since passed. Um, she was the youngest before I was born, and there were a lot of years between us. And as a result, um, my father had a tendency to love the baby and forget everybody else. And so she was love, 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 and then I came, right? So there was a lot of hate, and I can remember as maybe 7 or 8 fighting with her, and one of my other sisters saying, you just don't understand her, right? And at my age, I'm like, it's not my job to understand her. I don't like her, blah blah blah. When I got older, and I looked at her, with an intent to understand her, I saw the child that was screaming through her whole adult life for her father to show up,
Yeah.
and he never did. And two things happened. She died without him ever showing up. And when my father passed away, she was still around. He said to me, please tell her I'm sorry. And I looked at him and I said, it's too late. It's not my job to heal your wound.
Mm.
right? And so he took that karma with him, right? And hopefully the two of them met and resolved it there, right? And so the point of this is that sometimes that dependency, that the child has, carries through your whole life, right? If I had the tools I have now when she was still alive, I would have worked with her in healing that child that was crying for her dad, and all of the terrible choices she made because of that. I understood her, but I wasn't able to provide her with tools that she could use to resolve her issues before she passed on, right?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, having come from such a large family, I have siblings, and I have people in my life who I love immensely who still struggle with that addiction and stuff. And um it is their journey. And all I can do is, one of the things that I learned in the room in my sister's apartment, that moment, is my only job is to continue to expand myself.
Mhm.
And as a result, that inevitably gives other people permission or hope to face themselves and hopefully, examine what it is they need to do. And then, of course, I'm always here, but I have come to a place in my own journey that I can love you unconditionally and send you all of that energy, um, and not be entrenched in your level of consciousness anymore. And that's really important for me because, as I continue to do my own work and um, experience my own journey of unfolding, I realize that, again, it's easy for me if I'm not completely conscious and making very present choices to fall back into some of those patterns of behavior simply because they have been ingrained in my psyche. And so it takes a concerted effort on my part, and daily choices, habits. When I talk about overcoming addictive behaviors and addictions, I've overcome many. And it's not just to chemicals or sex, it's to shopping, it's to working, it's to perfectionism, it's to, the idea that I need to be a perfect mom. But the only way I do that is to continue to be present in the moment and make choices that are really nurturing for myself. And
Right.
so
And
for
nurturing for yourself,
yes,
and not feel
nurturing for
guilty that you're
myself.
not taking care of others, right? Because taking care of others, at least for me, is very successful in the corporate world because that gave me love, I
Yes.
thought. That gave me validation, I thought, right? And part of needing to be seen as a child, right? So we start off born in
Yep.
complete dependence on our parents, and we try to communicate our needs and hope that they show up for us, and we become reliant, and we are trained to be dependent on them for guidance, for belief, for a roof over our head, food in our mouth, right? And as we grow, what we are failing in as a society is then teaching the young or the teenager that, okay, here's how you now get to not be dependent on me slowly, right? If I, as a parent, have not created an environment where a child can feel safe and secure and seen, doesn't mean that you agree, right? Doesn't mean you spoil the child, but I see you, I see your suffering, I see your pain, I see what you're asking for from me. If they're not seen as a child, they don't know how to be seen as an adult. And that bridge is really difficult to navigate, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're spot on, and it's interesting because my 15-year-old the other day said to me, Mom, thank you for being such a cool mom. I don't see myself as a cool mom. I tell my daughter all the time, I can't protect you. That is the reality. Like, my job is to give you the tools and hopefully empower you to trust your own intuition, your own internal knowing that you can, one, reach out to me. You feel very safe to ask for help whenever it is you need it, and I'm there. And that is the commitment that I make and I follow through on. But more importantly is the way in which you learn self-reliance and really that internal self-love and self-confidence is to make choices. Some of them are not in the best interest of you, but also knowing that you have a person that you can fall back on and lean into. And so rather than smothering my daughters, I give them a certain amount of autonomy and just let them know that, one, when you make mistakes, that's how you grow. There's no judgment. Get curious, ask yourself why you made that choice and keep it moving. And two, when you do make a mistake, I'm going to be here to continue to love you unconditionally outside of whatever it is that choice was, because that is truly how we grow and evolve, and that is without condemning them or creating those emotions, shame and guilt. And when we talk about the work that David R. Hawkins did, shame and guilt are such low vibrational energies. And when we operate from such a low energetic vibration, it's really, really hard to get your needs met because what you're doing is you're attracting low energetic vibration.
Right, who
And
are also feeling shame and guilt.
yes,
Right, so don't be surprised when you have someone, that you are in a relationship that, has such baggage that they're bringing, right? Because so are you, right?
yep.
Right.
And that's what I tell my daughters all the time. I'm like, don't beat yourself up. That's the last
Right.
thing I want you to do. Get curious, examine it. Why'd you do it? Did you do it to look cool in front of your friend? If that's the case, why'd you need to look cool in front of your friend? Um, but get curious from a place of what can I take from this experience to help me move forward? And then let the rest go. Really, it
I
doesn't hurt.
always
Yeah.
ask, what's the lesson and what's the gift?
Yep.
Right. So even and this is kind of funny. This is kind of funny. So my ex and I, we still talk, right? And called and said, "Hey, happy Father's Day. Thank you for being on that journey of raising my children with me." Right. And it's like, yeah, it rained the other day and a tree limb fell on my car and smashed the trunk end of it. Well, it's a truck. And a whole story around that. When we were done, I said, "So what's the lesson in the tree falling?" And he goes, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, you told me you went and examined the tree and saw that there was a lot of rot and ant damage." I said, "Wouldn't the lesson be something like maybe you need to walk around your property and see what other trees need to be cut down before they fall in the house?" Right? So there's, yes, this is an inconvenient, but something happened, right? And that's what we mean. Go back to the what happened just before that tree fell. So what happened just before, a disaster or that you can learn from. Everything is an opportunity to make different choices moving on in your life.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, for me, I like you I was very successful in corporate America, and yet I always felt like I was an imposter. I didn't belong, right? Always.
Yes.
And
What am I
so
doing
now,
here?
yeah. And so now it's interesting because, I hear moments of that trying to present itself when I'm in a space with really conscious individuals, and I'm like, "Oh," and I'm like, "No, that's just me continuing to be reminded that I was always meant to be seen, that I just have to embrace this experience." And so I agree. It's just getting curious in the moment, and when you are having those experiences, I'll tell you, Gail, a lot of people in in the work that I do in my area. They see me as having it all figured out, despite the fact that I tell them I don't. It doesn't matter, right? When you do present as somebody who's grounded, who can be joyful in the face of external chaos, a lot of people misconstrue that as you have it all figured out. And I'm like, no, it's not that I have it ever figured out. It's that I get curious rather than judgmental. And when I'm curious, then again, it goes back to energy. If I remain curious, then I'm in a lighter state of being. I'm energetically open to lightness. But the minute I allow myself to be judgmental, then I struggle, and then my own energy drops. And so that's why I always encourage people, you know, again, I cannot emphasize enough. Guilt and shame are just, they are so toxic to mind, body, and spirit. They keep you in a perpetual state of anxiety, depression, addiction. And so if you can just find somebody to help you just release yourself just a little bit, it starts to lighten that load enough that you can start again. Momentum, energy is all about momentum. You start, and it's a pendulum, right? It starts slow, but it's going to kick into high gear, and then you can really experience life from a place of unconditional self-love and still be messy. I make mistakes all the time. It's just
I
I don't
love
judge myself
messy.
about it.
Messy is
Yeah.
delicious. It's an opportunity. It's
Yeah.
absolutely, I love messy,
Yeah.
right?
I
I
agree.
will purposely create a little bit of chaos because in chaos, there's change,
Yes.
right? So yes, I am a disruptor. I will admit, that is my entire life. I've been a disruptor. It's like this is we're too comfortable. So one of the things that you mentioned is making choices from a different energetic state,
Yes.
right? And you've all heard the saying, how can you expect something different to change when you're, doing the same thing? Well, that's again using your mind and not using your emotions,
Yes.
right? It is really making choices from an elevated state, right? So it's changing your emotional state, your physical state, and your emotional state. And there are ways to do that, and you can't go from shame to elation. Come on. That's definitely imposter syndrome, right?
Yep.
But there's as David Hawkins demonstrated, there are steps, there are levels, right, to get up. I will get my clients, at least let's get to anger, because you're at
Yes.
least
Yes.
at an emotional state where we can now shoot from there. But if you're in
Correct.
shame, we need from shame, let's get to anger, right? So let's go up, right? Go up that ladder. So, get his book, Power versus Force, right? Or to go
You
out
know
to the
what? I would recommend to your listeners because power versus force is very sciencey. It can feel really, really dense for many,
right.
many readers. He's written a lot of books, but the one that I recommend most for my clients is Letting Go. And it's simply because it is a step-by-step process of how to release that emotion. And when you can release, so he talks about levels, and you're going to have shame and guilt around a myriad of different topics, right? Because there's so many stories that we have within us. And so you may truly be free from shame and guilt when it comes to the way you parent, but still be steeped in guilt when it comes to your relationship with your mom. And so it really walks you through how to let go of those beliefs, which will release that emotion and then release those tens of thousands of thoughts that come along with that emotion. So that's when, and it's still a little bit dense, but it's much easier to consume.
Mhm.
And Power versus Force, wonderful book. I have it, but a lot of people are turned off by it just because it is heavy.
It
It's
is very
heavy.
heavy, but it is demonstrating the science behind it.
It
It
is,
is
yes.
deep into proving, and I think that's what Power versus Force is all about, is proving that this is scientifically so, and let me show you how.
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
But that,
I love that book.
yep.
Yeah.
But the chart is in there, right? That chart that you can see what's the next level and what's the next level and what's the next level. And so, so I love the statement that you made very early on is that you examine your house of cards,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that is probably the story, the gift, the experience that people need to really wrap their arms around right now.
I
Is
agree.
if you tell me, Gail, that my life is a story, how dare you tell me that I wrote the story of me getting cancer? How
Mm-hmm.
dare you tell me that I wrote the story of Lyme disease? How dare you tell me that I wrote the story of my son dying in a car accident? Right. And so, no, bad things happen to good people. The story is, how are you going to respond?
You were 100% right.
Right.
And what is that experience meant to open up for you?
Right.
Right. You
Right.
know,
Right. Don't tell me
you
that
know,
this is for me. Right.
yeah.
And it is. Some of the most amazing people I know. I have a friend who has chronic Lyme disease. I mean, she wasn't diagnosed with Lyme disease until she had it for like 15 years. So you can imagine the condition that she's in. And so there's no healing for her, right? There's just dealing. And she is someone who lives life 100 goddamn percent,
I love that.
right?
Love
She
that
will,
for her.
right? She will have days where she is in fetal position in pain, and then get beyond it and then be out and dance, compete, and, and work and invest and live life like no tomorrow. And I've told her, you've come into my life to demonstrate to me, get off your ass, Gail. If she can do it, what the hell's your excuse? Right.
Well, you know what I love most about that is, particularly when you and we talk about masculine energy, and I don't know if this is true for you, but for me, I operated in masculine energy all through corporate America. Probably not until my last 5 years did I tap into feminine energy.
Mhm.
And excuse me, um, what I realized is I never allowed myself to rest in that masculine energy. I had to do, do, do. There was so much judgment. And so for your friend to be able to, I mean, she doesn't have a choice, but just be with the experience that her body is presenting to her at that moment, but not creating a story and saying, tomorrow I'm going to be that too, which I think more often than not we do, right? It's like, oh, I'm sick, so tomorrow I can't do the thing I couldn't do today. And that keeps us stuck.
Right. And honestly, if she had followed medical advice, she would be probably a paraplegic in bed, because they were like, well, you shouldn't be out dancing. You shouldn't be doing massage therapy. You shouldn't. And she said, I'm going to die from this thing. I'm not going to die while I'm living.
Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful.
Right.
Exactly. That's why I'm not a fan of labels and I'm not a fan of diagnoses
Right.
because, again, when we're talking about conditioned mind, you have this quote unquote expert in a field who says that you now have this thing and this thing is going to prevent you from doing this. You know how many people attach to that? I talked to somebody about a year ago, and it struck me so much. I was so profoundly reminded of why I do the work I do. She has been seeing the same therapist for 20 years on the same medication, hasn't had any evolution, like she's stuck, and they continue to tell her that that's just how she's going to be. And because of their position, she's held on to that
Right. Because
and
they're
has
the experts.
experienced, yep, exactly. Yep. It's wild.
It's crazy. So we could go on and on forever about, I've got a friend, she does this process called the body talk, and I refer people to her because she gets patients who the a typical medical profession has given up on. And it's body talk. It's your body. She talks to your body to find out what's really going on.
Yep.
And she'll say things like, the last time that I saw her, it was, oh, there's some resentment and it's being held in your kidneys right now. And it's your own resentment towards you. Right. And so I'm like, I can kind of see where, yeah, you're right. I need to examine what's going on in my life that I'm feeling that way about myself. And so I did. Right.
Yeah.
And my kidneys are feeling fine now. Right. So it really is, and of course she has techniques to help you release those energies that are locked in your body, that's causing the dis-ease, right?
Yep.
That's going on. So there are so many modalities for healing, and I'm not saying no to the medical profession.
Yep.
I'm
Me
not,
neither. It's just
absolutely not.
curious.
Right? Just look for a bunch of different ways. It's just like healing emotionally. There are different tools that I present because I don't know what's going to work for you. You're a snowflake. I need to find out what is going to work for you to shine the brightest as a snowflake as you can.
And you know what? I would say we can even end on that because I will 100% agree. If there's anybody out there who's listening to your show right now and they are struggling with addictive behaviors or patterns or active addiction, there is no one size fits all. Just like Gail said, we are all individual, unique snowflakes, a great analogy. And I think what both you and I do in our work with our clients is to immerse you with a myriad of different tools and strategies so that as you're learning yourself and discovering yourself and what feels really good for you, you are able to play with and experience different techniques that eventually will help you so that when you are going to lean into that compulsion or that behavior that no longer serves you, you have a variety of other options that you can lean into that will nurture, support, and feel better for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is why it's your journey. We're there to witness and to guide. And so, Kerri, if people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
So you can reach me on my website, kerrilewis.coach, or you can reach me via email, love@kerrilewis.coach. And then you can always find me on Facebook and all the normal social media platforms. Again, kerrilewis.coach. I make it super easy.
Thank you so much for your time and your energy. This is fantastic. And this is Gail Craft from the Empowering Process podcast. If this particular episode brought something up for you, please do comment and we'll get back to you on that. If you know someone who this could benefit, could use this information, do share it out. And as always, please do subscribe so that you know every time there's an episode that comes up. This is Gail Craft signing off. Thank you. Bye-bye. Yes.
Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailcraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.